I'm keen now to get onto the alchemical side of things.
Uh-huh.
But then again, I'm looking at my little notes down here and about your chapter evolution, the evil illusion. I like that kind of. I like that title name, and the 5 elements of scientism as well. But I think we if there's ever an opportunity to talk about it again with you, perhaps we can cover some of these things in more detail. But I think we've probably covered some of that anyway, so that's good for me,
Yeah, I think we covered it at a high level as yeah.
Yeah, but I would like to know your thoughts on the evolution bit, because that's a big thing for me.
Yeah.
And when I was doing a biology exam, this was when I probably about, I don't know, 17, 18 possibly. It was in the 6th form. And we were doing it might have been a mock or something for the A level. It was about genetics. And then they started covering evolution. And as soon as I got onto evolution, I actually put a little side note in the margin, and I said, I don't believe in this, and put an arrow to the question. And when the paper came back that had been marked, there was another side commenting from my teacher saying, neither do I, but we've got to do it anyway. So where do you go from there, basically?
Yeah, evolution. Yeah, it's a funny one. I was kind of like that. I was like, I accepted it to some degree when I was taught about it, but then the more I sort of thought about it, it didn't really, fit with what I was learning. But I mean, the angle I came at it from in the book was about creation and creativity, and because that was like the big debate that was happening. It was in the 90s, wasn't it? It was evolution or creationism.
Yeah.
At that time, I wasn't really paying much attention to that, but I remember, it was an argument that was going on for a while, and I was not religious at that time either, so I was definitely leaning more towards the evolution side of things.
Yeah.
But as I became an artist more and just devoted myself to making art, I started to see things as a work of creativity. Things in nature, like the human body, like animals' bodies, the plants and stuff like that. I just see them as like these perfect works of like art and functionality, like living artworks. Like everything is so well designed, and and I could see that like it was just better than anything a man could create. It's like divine science or something. And so,
absolutely, yeah.
Evolution is totally opposed to creation and creativity, and the idea that anything in nature was created or was conceived of by some higher mind. So. Evolution is the idea that it all just came about through random chance and time and trial and error, and just atoms wiggling about on the rocks, and eventually like just wiggling themselves into bigger and better things. But it's just for an artist like that, it's just really offensive. Like what if like someone listened to one of my music and they were like, oh, that happened as the result of evolution. It was like, no, it didn't. It was creativity. I like made it deliberately. I spent time and I worked on it and focused and yada yada. And it's just really insulting to call something evolution when it's actually creation.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the angle I took on it. Really, the idea that it's actually hiding creation. So, the word creation is in the first page of the Bible, right? It's like the world is a creation, God made a creation. But with evolution, it's like, well, there's no God and there's no creation. And then so you have then what about creativity? How are we able to create if the universe is not capable of creating?
Yeah.
It just makes so
yeah.
There's a lot of things. And then of course all the stuff with the transmutation of animals from one, from goo to you via the zoo.
The fossil record.
Yeah. They call it from goo to you via the zoo.
I like that. Yeah.
As goo and then went through all the animals and eventually got to human.
Yeah.
And I just find all that quite disagreeable as well. And there's been a lot of people have had a lot of fun with attacking evolution, and it is, I guess I tried to have a bit of fun with it as well. It's not a long chapter in the book, but it's an important one, because it is like a cornerstone of this false worldview, is the
Yeah, yeah.
belief of evolution. Yeah.
It's a distraction away from the truth, I feel. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know, I'll get slated for that, but
Well, it's
but
absolutely right. Yeah.
design, everything is done by design. And when you look into sacred geometry, which is a pathway I started taking last year, and you start looking at the number patterns and the sequences in the mathematics of it and the geometry of it, it's utter perfection, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And you cannot dispute the perfection behind the design.
Yeah.
And it works, just like alchemy. It works, you know. You get this, you put this together, you put that together, and you produce a result.
Mhm.
And it's just mind blowing stuff. And you know, they always the argument is about the human eye. You know, they like to use the human eye, don't they, as one of the arguments. And but yeah, the fossil record is sadly lacking, you know,
Mhm.
between the species.
Mhm.
And I've yet for anybody to come back to me and say, oh, well, but you know, this creature went from this to this to this to this, and we've got the fossil record of it. There's no gaps in between, it seems. Yeah,
Yeah.
of millions of years. And then, and then I think, well, so you take your amoeba, and your amoeba's going, well, I want to will myself into, you know, growing a pair of lungs, you know, so I can go on land. Where does that happen exactly? You know, you know, I mean, I've wanted to be a pilot for being a kid. You know,
Yeah.
why couldn't I will myself into growing wings and flying? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I know
Yeah.
that might sound ridiculous, but then again, some of the stuff that comes out from the evolution theory is also ridiculous, you know?
Yeah, like the fish coming out of water, growing legs and lungs and all that, like you're saying,
Yeah,
you know, and they're just like, oh, that just happened. It took millions of years, but it, you know,
yeah,
it just happened,
yeah,
you know, just through the random, you know,
yeah.
bumping of atoms, and yeah, just, uh,
And
yeah,
then
it's
somebody comes back and then and says, but what about the lungfish? You know, what about the lungfish that crawls its way onto the. Yeah, but where's the kind of in between the lungfish?
yeah,
Where's the lungfish going from there? Have we got any fossil record of where the lungfish went? Or did it
mhm.
just thought, well, I'm okay now, so I'll just stay a lungfish, you know? Yeah, it's yeah, I must admit I struggle with it. I struggle with it,
Yeah,
and I've done for a very, very long time, you know. But I do get the fact that, you know, if we are made in God's image, the divine source of all love, or whatever you want to call it, you know, the great spirit,
mhm,
then we are creative beings. You know, we naturally build and create and design, you know, the artwork that comes out of us, the music that comes out of us.
mhm.
It's just phenomenal, you know, and we connect that always connect it back to the spirit, back to the soul,
Mhm.
because it comes from the spirit and the soul, you
Yeah.
know. And we say, don't we, when we're creating, we are inspired,
Mhm.
you know.
We have the spirit in us.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
And where does that come from? Is it an idea from the ether? Probably. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they say that the Bible says like the Holy Spirit is comes through the breath, doesn't it? It's like you
Yeah.
actually breathe it in, fill up on it. You know, it's like the Spirit of God in the air.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, you know, I mean, yeah, it says, you know, that's where we get our inspiration from, where we get our strength from,
Mm,
you know, all this kind of thing. But yeah, so I think with evolution, God, I had another thought on there and it's just escaped me. Sorry, Jonathan. Lost my train of thought
it,
there.
it gets worse as you get older, Steve. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, it's come back now. I got it. It was actually Jane Roberts Frost said to me recently about this because it was in our last conversation we talked a bit about reincarnation
Mm.
and stuff about Robert Flood and that,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and I was talking to Jane about it, and she said something nice. She said reincarnation is the true evolution.
Mm.
You know, and I just clicked. It's like yes, because you know there is changes happening. You
Yeah.
know, and but it's happening sort of like between lives, between generations. It's like, you know, new generations are coming and replacing the old generations, and
Mm.
that's, you know, and so there's a directionality to human life and even
Yeah.
animal life. They are evolving, but not evolving between species.
Mm.
The apes are not evolving into people. The people aren't evolving into aliens. It's
Mm.
like, but between lives, we're learning and coming back with new
Mm.
ideas and stronger and better ways of doing things and all this kind of stuff. So
Mm.
yeah, it's like there is a spiritual evolution that's happening. There is a evolution of consciousness that's happening, but
Mm.
there isn't a transmutation of one species into another.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we in my sacred geometry journey, you begin to learn about the toroidal energy field, and I've meditated on this, got quite a lot of information on this over the years, and we're all on this journey of a toroidal energy field, if you like, all kind of going up, into the center and then back down again, and it's just a continuous cycle of energy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are, in other words, attaining perfection in the spirit, and then when we've achieved perfection, we come back and do it all again. Yeah. Some people might find that a bit depressing, thinking, I don't want to do it all again. Why? But it's but you can choose to do whatever you want to do. There's freedom in spirit. I could talk a lot on that. I won't, but I could. But if we imagine, because everything now, people are beginning to understand the concept of the torus, trees, the hemispheres of the brain, the chambers of the heart, everything's a toroidal energy field, constant flow of energy,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful thing. Yeah. And
Mhm.
that toroidal energy field is kind of hidden, although it's technically well within mainstream physics. It's not really talked about a lot, and or it's considered like a secondary phenomenon. So it's like it's the phenomenon around the magnet. But the magnet's the real thing. The magnet is the solid.
Yeah.
That's the real stuff, right? The toroidal field is just something that happens around it or whatever.
Yeah.
But because the more you look, you realize, well, the toroidal field is actually more fundamental even than matter itself.
Yeah.
It's like a dynamic pattern that happens in the ether that is the basis of everything, like every living thing. And because it has both masculine and feminine qualities.
Yes.
So there's energy is coming out of it and then coming back in. So like in science terms, masculine energy is an outflow and feminine energy is an inflow. And with the Taurus, you're going out and round and back in, out and round and back in. So you have this constant perfect balance of masculine and feminine energy. And that's the basis of all creation, and and that is in mainstream physics and in alternative physics. The toroid is always there. It's around everything.
Yes.
So that is really a key bit of knowledge, is
and
that
you
toroidal field.
cut an apple in half and you've got the perfect toroidal field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can see like the crown on your head as well, like where the hair spins, there's it's your hair spins right at the top of the head where the
very much so. I remember those days, Steve.
Well, that might have been a bad analogy to use.
Not at all. I'm not sensitive about being bald, by the way. So, nobody upsets me about that. My granddad was bald, my dad was bald, so there wasn't much chance for me, really. But,
but the energy's still there. That's it, though. The toroid is still there.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But you're absolutely spot on right there about the spiral. And then we talk about the spiral, and the spiral is one of the most fundamental structures of the universe. And things work in spirals. You got to look at Fibonacci sequence for that, and it's just mind blowing. Anyway, honestly, I could talk to you all day, but I just want to really focus now on the alchemical side of things, Steve. Sure, people are probably as interested in that as going back to its absolute basics. What actually is alchemy then? What's the process? What happens?
Well, it's essentially a worldview or a science which is based in the four elements: fire, earth, air, and water. And those are not on the periodic table. The periodic table of elements doesn't contain any elements, as I point out in the book, because the chemical elements are not the elements of nature.
Mm.
Chemical elements are the result of transmuting the elements of nature, you know. So like hydrogen and oxygen, for example, are made from water
Mm.
and fire. You know, you run electricity through water, it produces hydrogen and oxygen. But there's actually nobody is able to like put hydrogen and oxygen together to make water. It
Mm.
doesn't work the other way, right? And so the water and the fire are the fundamental elements that produce the chemicals. The chemicals are not the fundamental elements. And so, and this goes back, and of course, fire, earth, air, and water, everyone can sense them, everyone can feel them, everyone can measure them, everyone can work with them. You don't need a degree or a PhD. Children and animals can understand it. It's like there's very clear differences between fire, earth, air, and water. And so, you know, you're essentially then working with those as your basic elements as an alchemist. And there's a set of processes which relate to fire, earth, air, and water. So, like, for example, calcination is application of fire. So if you're like heating something, or if you're radiating it with sunlight, or if you're pulverizing something like in a a mortar and pestle, you know, breaking it down, that's fire as well, because it's vibration. Fire is all about vibration.
Mm.
So whenever you're exposing something to vibration, sound healing,
Mm. Yeah.
again, sound is vibration. It's like it's purifying.
Mm.
Um, so anything where you're applying fire to a substance or an object or a person, that would be called calcination in alchemy, and an operation of fire. And then you have dissolution, which of course is water, dissolving things in water. That's
Yeah.
another way of to purify things, is to dissolve them in water and then evaporate the water off. And it's like the water takes the impurities out of it, and then you have a purer thing. So yeah, and then there's separation, which is to do with the air, which is like separating things and putting like with like, which is like tidying your room, you know, is an act of separation. It's like you put the books together with the other books, you know, put this over here with that, you know, organize things, separate them, and you know, put things to get in their proper place, which corresponds with air. And then you have conjunction, which corresponds with earth, which is actually about bringing things together and joining them together, you know, unifying stuff together. I always give the example of making a cup of tea, which involves all four of those processes. So calcination would be the drying of the tea leaves. You know, you pick the leaves and then you dry them. That's an application of fire. And then you dissolve them in water to extract the tea into the water. That's a dissolution. And then you take the tea bag out of the water, which is a separation. And then you put the milk and the sugar in and mix it all together. And that's a conjunction. And so, you know, just in the process of making a cup of tea, you've used the first four processes of alchemy, and you've used fire, earth, air, and water. You know, right there. Now there's three more processes that are, you know, more technical, and but essentially, yeah, when you start to realize that like everything is fire, earth, air, and water, or a mixture thereof, um, it's very clarifying way to see things, and everything becomes eminently practical. And you realize actually you have abundant resources for everything, because there's no shortage of fire, no shortage of water, no shortage of air, and no shortage of earth. Like literally, it is infinitely abundant, all of it. And so it's very liberating when you start practicing alchemy, because you know, as a physicist, I'm like, well, you know, I can't afford a particle accelerator. You know, it's like I can't actually do any of the physics, because it's all so, you know, expensive and, you know, complex and stuff like that. But then you come to alchemy and you're like, actually, anyone can do it.
Yeah.
Just like with music or whatever, anyone can do it at home in their own way for their own benefit. Um, and it's so it's just been very empowering coming to alchemy, honestly. But it's like it's so fundamental that it's right there in front of us and we don't even
Yeah.
notice it, you know.
So you can reproduce kern in a teapot then, basically.
Reproduce what, sorry?
Kern in a teapot, or cern, whichever way you pronounce it.
Oh, Sarn, Karen. Yeah, I've not heard it pronounced that way, actually.
Yeah.
Uh, well, yeah, that's it, you know, and you actually have something at the end of it, a cup of tea.
Yeah, yeah.
But all those like Sarn, you know, all that money and everything, Sarn, what do we actually have as a result of it? Like nothing at all. You know, it's just not produced anything of any value.
Yeah.
So, but with a little basic alchemy knowledge, you can make a cup of tea, and that might make someone really happy.
For all those
Yeah.
scientists that are refuting, the alchemical side of things, when they take a break at CERN, I'll use the correct pronunciation. When they take a break at CERN, they're having a cup of tea or coffee. They're actually doing alchemy.
Yeah, doing alchemy in their break. Yeah, yeah, it's yeah. So alchemy is actually very down to earth, and all it takes you that like everything in creation has a name. We actually don't need to make up new names for things in nature because everything already has a name. Like, and so alchemy just uses the names of things in nature, and it's all like familiar words. There's not like technical jargon. I mean, there might be the occasional like new word you have to learn, but not like academia, where it's
Mm,
just this whole other language of like super technical stuff that you're uh yeah, it's just really bamboozling.
yeah.
Alchemy is very straight and direct and to the point, like the elements that are actually at your fingertips.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I mentioned this the other day uh, about speaking with you today, Steve, and when I mentioned alchemy, people said, "Oh, you're going to be turning lead into gold," you know,
Yeah,
and the Philosopher's Stone, Harry Potter and all that kind of stuff,
yeah.
and I love all that about it, and you know. There was something I was going to talk to you about, and I can't. I'm looking at my notes actually, and I'm thinking, where did I write this? Anyway, whatever.
We can
But
talk about lead into gold if you'd like.
yeah, well, I think people might be interested in that. I mean, is there any truth in it? Basically, can we all start turning lead into gold?
Um, well, I've read accounts of it. I mean, I've not done it myself.
Mm,
Like literally, talking about literally turning the metallic lead into metallic gold, and the Philosopher's Stone is said to be able to do that. So
mm,
if you can imagine, what they would do is they would, they have a furnace and a crucible, and then they'll put some lead into the crucible, melt it down until it's a liquid, and then they get a few like a pinch of the Philosopher's Stone, sprinkle it in the lead, and then add more fire for a certain amount of time or whatever, and then let it cool down, and then they've got gold. So
mm,
I've read accounts of people witnessing all that, but again, I've not reproduced it,
yeah.
honestly, but also the lead into gold is also symbolic of the transformation process itself. It's not
Mm,
just about lead into gold; it's about any like common raw or impure material being worked until it's something valuable and long lasting and untarnishable.
yeah.
So it's lead into gold is symbolic of making art as
Mm,
well. Like when you actually all you have is like some paper and a bunch of paint, but through like working it carefully over a long period of time, you can then produce this work of art, which is like a one of a kind, unique thing. And even though you just use some like crude materials to make it, you
mm,
took them through a series of processes that resulted in this wonderful bit of art. So like the art is the gold then,
mm,
because the gold represents the object of the work, the object to be attained.
yeah.
Um, and that's how I arrived at audio alchemy, was because I realized it's like that making music. You're starting
Mm,
with instruments or sounds or whatever, just like basic stuff, and then by applying the rules of music and processing it, you work it and work it until you have a piece of music,
mm,
which is like the gold. And it is like gold because actually music doesn't tarnish. It literally, once it's the quality is established, it just lasts forever. It seems it just goes out there, and um, it's like it just through the generations, and it's a record, like an actual like record of a moment in time or something, and um, it's always new to somebody, so like even though like the music I made 20 years ago, to me it doesn't sound shiny anymore.
yeah.
To someone who's never heard it,
Yeah.
it could sound just completely brand new,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so music is like gold in a way, and art is like gold as well, when it's done right. And so yeah, lead into gold, I think it's possible,
Mm,
although I've not reproduced it. But
mm.
I also think lead into gold is symbolic of the transformational process itself.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah, wonderful. Because I was going down the route in the book of when you started introducing the alchemical symbols,
Mm.
yeah, and these symbols are kind of in mathematics, but the thing that really struck me, well, they're not just in mathematics, they're in astronomy and all kinds of things, is the connection. I think perhaps we had a pre-talk chat, if you like, told you perhaps about my Atlantean connection and how the language was formed.
Mm-hmm.
We started talking about the Tower of Babel and things like that, and a lot of those symbols are Atlantean in origin. And
Yeah.
that and I'm doing a triangle with my hands. I'm just
Yeah.
become aware of doing that really. And but and what I love about it was that a symbol can mean thousands of words. You could talk about one symbol or explain one symbol, for as long as you want it to, really. It's not just this triangle, but you could talk about the whole connection to everything just through that one symbol or just a handful of symbols.
Yeah, the symbols are so deep, and I quite believe that they're of Atlantean origin. I mean, they're just so ancient, and yeah, the more you contemplate them, you really feel that it's
Mm,
like it's not just something someone made up, like
mm,
in recent
mm,
science or whatever. It's like really just goes way, way back to
yeah.
it's like the start of everything,
Mm,
And yeah, with the triangle, so you've got air and fire represented by an upward triangle,
mm,
water and earth represented by a downward pointing triangle.
yeah.
And it's because air and fire, the tendency is always to go up,
Mm,
like heat rises and air rises, but water and earth go down.
mm,
Water flows down, earth falls down. Um, and then you also have the fact that just in your normal experience of life, the fire and the air are above you. They're
mm.
above your head, the sky and the air, and then the earth and the water are below your feet as well. So there's that too.
Which again is very simplistic. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
points to what it is.
yeah. And then there's the masculine and the feminine. So the fire and the air are considered masculine elements. So
Mm,
that means sky is considered masculine, and
mm,
then water and earth are feminine elements. So the earth below our feet is considered feminine. So that's Father Sky and Mother Earth.
yeah.
Was what the ancients called it, Father Sky and Mother Earth,
Mm.
and so actually the upward triangle represents the phallus as
Okay.
well.
Yeah.
Downward triangle represents the womb.
Boom. Yeah. Makes
And then the
sense.
symbol for ether is the six-pointed star, which is the upward triangle and the downward triangle together in balance,
Yeah.
which is like the phallus and the womb. Like I said about the ether, it has masculine and feminine energy in it, and that's how it can create anything or
Yeah.
everything. It has both outward flowing energy and inward flowing energy in this toroidal cycle, or like an ether vortex is what I usually call it.
Yeah.
Um, and so so the symbols are really deep. They speak to the importance of like the fundamentalness of gender in creation, and
Yeah.
how it's important to always have a masculine and feminine principle together in balance to create anything.
Yeah.
um and it tells us that like life is the product of essentially life is the product of lovemaking between Father Sky and Mother Earth.
Mm. Yeah.
And this is what I learned when I went to study with shamans and stuff. Yeah, this is the way they see the world. Father Sky, Mother Earth.
Mm.
It's very simple, as above, so below.
Yeah.
Um, and with alchemy, it really points to that, and you get the practical powers of the elements, but also their sort of esoteric nature as well, being like gendered. Um, it's super interesting, and there's tons more alchemical symbols, but like just the four elements. There's enough you can learn from just those four symbols, those triangles.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And I think we did talk previously, didn't we, about as you mentioned, Hermes Trismegistus, is it Gistus? I'll get these pronunciations right.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I use them both. I sometimes say
Yeah.
Gistus and sometimes
Yeah.
just
Is it a G? Is it a hard G or a soft G? I don't know. And then we started talking about Thoth, which is another one, difficult one to pronounce. You know,
Yeah.
people have got different. I actually went on Google and did a pronunciation thing, and it kept about three websites said Thoth, so I'm going to go along with that. But that just all came in, introduction to yourself, Steve. I just done quite a bit with my sacred geometry because I'm doing a little course in workshop in July based around the ancient stuff, which is sacred geometry. We're going to be looking at cymatics, with seeing sound, as I call it, and talking about the ancient stuff. And then I came across this website about the emerald tablets. I'd heard about them, but never really researched them, And with the work I've been doing on Atlantis, it absolutely blew my mind. It all started to really tie in with what I'd received through meditation, and then being introduced to you, and the alchemical aspect of things, and I kind of had this amazing another epiphany, if you like, literally within the last kind of month or so. And that's what I love about life, is that you never stop learning. It's as
Yeah.
life's not long enough. I want to live till 200. You know what I mean? There's not not enough time to learn it all.
No, that's we've just got a short window to like learn what we can, but it's like the eternal truth is just so vast and mysterious that it's like, we can never seem to know it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know I'm just referring to my notes again here, but you've talked about the audio alchemy. I think that's brilliant, And I know in your book you talk about 432 hertz, and there's a lot of stuff going on about that at the moment. I'm just working out the solfeggio frequencies, and I'm seeing some brilliant number patterns in that. It's design again. It all comes back to design.
Mm-hmm.
And these frequencies weren't random frequencies; they were chosen for a reason.
Yeah, based on the natural number series.
Yeah.
So it's just like there's a natural musical scale in the number series that works perfectly well. But what we've done is we've created a man-made musical scale that's like, more complex and less accurate and, less satisfactory, and put it in its place. Like with so many things, just like messed with nature or changed nature in some way. I know a lot of people don't think of numbers as being nature, but it is. Like the numbers 1 to 9 are, in everything, and they're like it's like everything that can be known is reducible to numbers. So it's like the numbers are the roots of all knowledge. And so with 432, what you have is this very elegant, natural, musical system that sounds great, but it's been altered and changed somehow into this equal temperament 440 system that we all use as standard now. And I don't go around telling people that it's bad for you or anything. I realize almost all the music I've ever loved is in equal temperament 440. Right? I'm not going to dismiss all of music because of that, but I just point out that like it's not an elegant scale, and it's not actually satisfactory because it's got lots of approximations and irrational numbers and truncations, and the perfect fifth, which is supposed to be the most harmonious, most beautiful interval in music, is actually not even perfect. It's out by an error of 2% in the standard music scale. So it's like if they can't even get the perfect fifth perfect, surely you can't. It surely can't be deemed to be a satisfactory music scale. But like with a lot of things in music, a little bit of distortion can be quite pleasant, but too much, and it's like, it's bad for you. And so it's like that. The standard music scale actually has a little bit of distortion built into it. Okay, it can be enjoyable or whatever, but it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be there. Like the standard scale should be precise and natural. And then if you want to add distortion, you can, but there shouldn't actually be distortion in the standard scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And just harking back to good old Nikola Tesla once again, with the 369, and those numbers just repeat themselves over and over again in many things. And if you go into numerology, I don't know if you've done any numerology on anything, but if you go 432, so you go 4 plus 3 equals 7, and then 7 plus 2 equals 9, so you've arrived at 9. Yeah. Whereas if you go 440, 4 plus 4 equals 8, so you're slightly off the perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's again.
Yeah. So all the frequencies reduced to 9 actually in the scale. So not just A42, but all the other ones also reduced to the number 9, with the exception of C.
Yeah.
And C is like C is like the electric frequency, and the others are magnetic, because the 369 is the magnetic numbers. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the book about that, but yeah, so with music as well, it's like we have again this idea of like we've like meddled with nature and made something unsatisfactory.
Yeah.
And I'm just advocating for a return to to mimicking nature. Actually, like, let nature be our guide and our teacher. And if we mimic nature, then we can do great things. But if we're always meddling with it and distorting it, then we end up with problems.
Exactly. And this is the shamanic way, isn't it? It's working in harmony with nature, and rather than fighting against it, because everything, if you look at the material world, everything boils down to it's a war on this, it's a war on that, and we're always at war with everything. We're at war with the planet. The planet's fighting back against us. And but when you look at tribal nations, they all lived in harmony with the planet, didn't they?
Yeah. So it's like we just want to get back to just a more honorable relationship toward Mother Earth. I mean, like the shamans talk about it. They say like it's all related. Like the way, for example, the way they treat women in society is related to the way we treat the Earth, because the Earth is, the great mother, right? The great woman in which we're all part of and we're all born from.
Yeah.
And it's like, so they say that they see it's like the way women are treated in society is a reflection of the way we treat the Earth. It's the same attitude. It's all the same attitude towards whether it's human women or towards nature. It's just like an attitude that's taken towards the feminine elements, if you like. So I mean, there's lots on that, but it needs to be healed. It's
definitely. Well, we're now in the age of Aquarius, of course, where the divine feminine's starting to, play a much bigger role than it did before. And, again, I could talk to you all day about this, Steve. I'm very mindful of time, but I've really enjoyed this conversation. Before I let you go and release you into the outside, into the ether, into the outside world, is there a story behind this tattoo I keep seeing on your arm?
Oh yeah, the tattoo. Yeah. It's quite a good story. I mean, so I got it after I'd been to a festival back in 2008, and I had this vision. I kept thinking about it. I had this vision of like a DNA, molecule, but with the chakras in between, like, and I was drawing it, and I thought, I really like this. I want to get this as a tattoo, because it's like DNA is like the materialistic Western view of things as like atoms and molecules, that view of life. And then the chakras are like this Eastern view where it's like energy swirling in the ether. And so I thought it was quite neat to like, put them together like that. And I got it tattooed onto my arm back in 2008. And but then, many years later, after I started researching alchemy, this was in 2017, I realized that it looks exactly like the caduceus, which was not a symbol that I was aware of back at that time. But it's kind of upside down. I mean, I don't think you can see it too well.
Oh, yeah.
It looks like the caduceus is. The caduceus actually got 7 points of crossover with the snakes. Weave 7 times, so I've got 7 points of cross.
Yeah.
Even though it's a DNA helix, the chakras are there. There's 7 of them, and anyway, so the story of the caduceus is that it's a symbol of alchemy. It's a symbol of healing and enlightenment and transformation, and it was apparently given to Hermes by Apollo for inventing the first musical instrument, which was the lyra. So that Hermes took a tortoise shell
Mm.
some hairs from his mother's head, and he strung the hairs onto the tortoise shell and made a lyra, which was basically the first guitar, if you
Mm.
like. Um, and as a reward for that, he was given this staff with the two snakes and the wings on top.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was a bit of a goosebumps moment because I was like really deep into alchemy at that point. I'd been reading a lot about Hermes, and obviously I'd been doing musical work as well. So it was like I'd been doing musical work, and then I ended up with the caduceus on my arm. It's, you know, corresponding to it anyway. And so it just all kind of, it was just spooky, you know, like tattoos can become so much more meaningful after you've made them, you know,
Exactly.
uh, than what you knew about them at the time. So yeah, so I feel a connection to Hermes and a sort of a deep soul connection to alchemy.
Mm.
This led me to this guy Robert Flood,
Yes.
who I talked about in the book, and who you mentioned, who is this brilliant character from history from about 400 years ago
Mm.
that I never heard of, never in my life. I just found him through researching alchemy, but he was just great, and he's like done so many great works. I've got a big book there, the microcosm and the macrocosm, with all these drawings and stuff. I mean, the guy was a genius of
Mm.
incredible proportions, and I found out I had lots in common with him.
Yeah.
All these like spooky things in common, like we're into all the same stuff. And it turns out his alias, he had an alias. He was a musician with
Mm.
an alias, and his alias was Defluctibus, which
Mm.
means of the flux. And
Okay.
and my alias is Headflux. And people used to call me the Flux, you know, and things like this. And
Yeah.
so yeah, it's like very strange, you know. I found I had a lot in common with this guy from like 400 years ago, and I was reading his works as if it was like it was just, you know, I couldn't believe I'd found this stuff. This guy's been like erased from history almost, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all these other guys like Copernicus and Kepler, and you know, they're all given lots of glory.
Mm.
But guys like Robert Flood don't get a look in, even
Yeah.
though they were true geniuses, and you can see from their work that they were
Mm.
true geniuses, you know.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's
but
because he was probably speaking the truth, Steve. And
yeah, hang on,
yeah, no worries.
sorry, that was just someone else getting their mower out. So the
That's fine.
soundtrack of my
Yeah.
life at the moment.
Well, we've had no angle grinders going today, so that's good, you know. But no, that's amazing. And I think, you know, if we ever did a part two, if you were up for that, we could perhaps talk about that in a lot more detail. Spiritually, we are all waking up to who we were or are, yeah. And where we're going and what we're here to do. And I think you've ably demonstrated that today in the work that you're doing. You've had a major change in your life path, you know, and there's so many people now across the world that are doing exactly the same thing. A lot of people are coming out of the corporate mindset and coming into more of a natural working in communities and working more with nature, you know. So we are remembering this ancient stuff. And I come across it daily in my work, you know, and it's really exciting. There's a dark way of looking at the world. If you want to go down that route, I have been there, you know, and I thankfully dragged myself out of it. But there's so much going on in the light sense now, you know, that it is extremely exciting times. And one of my guides said to me, I'll never forget this. He says, "You are the ancients that people will remember for bringing the new earth."
Mm-hmm.
And that just blew my mind. Yeah. So we're kind of on that cycle again of, you know, rebirth, remembering and everything. And yeah, so it's been a fascinating talk, Steve. Absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for your time today. And I know we've had a few issues with the internet.
Yeah, it all worked out pretty well in the end, though. Yeah.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
It did. Well, there was one point where it was all starting to go a little bit fuzzy again at your end, but it held in there and everything's absolutely fine. But of course, what I want to ask you now is, you know, where can people buy your book, number one? Because I would wholeheartedly recommend reading that amazing piece of literature. And websites, anything like that you want to mention where you can find out more about you?
Sure, yeah. So my personal website is stephenyoung.uk, not co, but just .uk. And my music website is headflux.com. Now, for the book, you can buy, if you want a hardback copy direct from me, you can buy on my website, and I'll write a personal note, handwritten note on the inside for you and post it to you myself. But it's also available on Amazon.
Fantastic. So, just very quickly, if it can be a quick question, where do you think the Fool's Journey is going to take you next?
Oh, goodness, that is the question. Well, I feel like I need to start doing some videos now. I've kind of shied away from doing video content. I mean, it's easy when you're talking to somebody, you know, as we are now, but
Mm.
actually just solo, like myself talking to the camera type content. I've definitely found that to be quite challenging over the years. But I feel like that's where I need to go next. I need to like turn my book into video content in some way, shape, or form to take the message to the next level. Um, but I've got some music projects on the go. But yeah, beyond that, at the moment, I really don't know. I feel like there might be some call to action at some point. At the moment, I'm still just an independent, artist, author, researcher. But I feel like maybe I don't know. At some point, the world's going to call me into action for something. I don't know what it's
Yes.
going to be, but we shall see.
Well, I will certainly. I think we just briefly touched on this when we had a chat before. That if ever you find yourself down our neck of the woods, we'd love to have you at our centre to do a talk on this subject. I'm sure there'll be lots of fascinated and interested people in that.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Yeah, I'd love to. I'll definitely keep that in mind. I'll plan a tour to come through the UK and meet yourselves and some other like-minded groups.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, Steve. Well, I'm gonna release you now, and thank you so much once again. It's been absolutely brilliant, and I'm hoping we can catch up at some point in the future. Well, in the not too distant future, all being well.
Yeah.
Thanks once again, Steve.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. That was a great conversation, and I hope we get to chat to you again soon.
Wonderful. Take care.
All right, take care. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye.